Hey guys, welcome back to another video on VGC. You know, here at VGC, we like to keep away opinion from fact, but sometimes it's just good to go off the record. I nailed that intro, finally. I've been trying to do that for some time on this show now. We've got two of the game's busiest industry experts on the show today. Obviously, our very own Andy Robinson and Chris Scullion as well. Chris is obviously Mr. Nintendo as well. Chris, you're right, firstly, do you want to give us a bit of background of why I've just called you Mr. Nintendo, I guess, in general?
Yeah, I mean, I should stress it's not a nickname I've given myself. That would sound really...
anything to do with his Mario curtains.
Exactly, I mean, that's why. No, yeah, well, I wrote for the official Nintendo magazine many years ago, RIP, before moving on to CVG, RIP. And so ever since then I've been kind of doing...
A graveyard. Even a trail of publications in your
destruction behind me.
Don't forget Nintendo Gamer.
Nintendo Gamer, yeah, that was a 9 month stint. I managed to bring that down to its knees within 9 months. So it's actually a bit of a curse having me on here. I expect the site to be doomed within a year. But yeah, so and now since then I've been writing Nintendo encyclopedias. So the SNES encyclopedia is out next month.
Yeah,
the NES one's already out, and yeah. So I'm just shattered, basically.
all during a pandemic as well. We're all tired, basically. But we're going to start today with some Nintendo news because if you've been paying any attention to the world of Nintendo and the internet this week, you know there's been an absolute ton of leaks. The Gigaleak, as people have been affectionately calling it, basically. We've got to discuss that. There's been a ton of prototype classic games have come up. There's been loads of content. It's obviously been attained illegally as well, which is pretty dodgy. But for Nintendo enthusiasts, this is pretty exciting news, right, Chris? Because there's been a lot to delve through, hasn't there?
It's been ridiculous. I mean, nothing excites me more genuinely than seeing the kind of behind the scenes stuff for old Nintendo games, especially because it's so thin on the ground over the years. It's very rare you get a kind of glimpse at behind the curtain at how Nintendo does its thing. So to suddenly be hit with so much of it in one go is just ridiculous, and it's hard to it's difficult publicly to get too excited about it because obviously, like you say, it was obtained illegally, so you can't really come out and say yes, we've broken them, because that sounds horrendous. But at the same time, secretly you're sitting like that going, what's next? What are they going to get onto Excite Bike 64? Are they going to break that one? And it's been a crazy week.
Is there anything in particular that stood out for you, Andy, from all this? Anything that's kind of piqued your interest or curiosity?
It's like Chris says, it's pretty fascinating, right? Because they're a very secretive company generally. So you just don't see this stuff. I mean, there's like prototypes for games that people didn't even know existed coming out. Like there's like a Super Scope game where playing as a character that's kind of sleepwalking. I don't know if you saw that. And it's like a whole game. There's like 6 levels or something. There's the early prototype of Yoshi's Island, like where it's a Donkey Kong game, which absolutely no one had a clue about. I mean, I guess for our age, nodding to Scullion's T-shirt, the most kind of fascinating stuff is the N64 kind of prototypes that come out. They've not really been as substantial as the SNES stuff that leaked out. I guess perhaps to do with the size of those games, but I know that a lot of the kind of the leak files for that stuff were corrupted or empty, so you've only got kind of glimpses of puzzle pieces of like older prototypes that we might have seen in screenshots in 90s magazines and stuff like that. But yeah, certainly for Nintendo fans, it's been really, really exciting. Acknowledging that obviously it's a little bit uncomfortable how it's come about, and obviously that's not really something we want to encourage. Like hacking servers and stuff.
But the crazy thing is, like, obviously, people, absolute nerds like me and Andy, just have spent decades just kind of poring over and digesting every single interview that the developers have, Nintendo developers give, because they're so rare. And when they occasionally kind of give references to, oh yeah, we had this back in the past and we had that, and they just mention it, and you start dreaming, go, oh, I wonder what that looked like. And suddenly all these things are appearing that you remember from interviews like 10 years ago. I remember a long time ago, some Mario Kart 64 developer kind of said in a throwaway comment, oh, we had like a town track at one point and we chopped it because it slowed the game down too much. It was too complex. It took too long to drive around it, so we just scrapped it. And you read that and go, oh, I wonder what that would have looked like. And that was one of the things that leaked, was like this map, an uncoloured map of just like loads of buildings in a town. And you're like, okay, so that's what it was. Like after all these years, you finally get to see, and you go, yeah, it was pretty massive. That's fair enough.
It's like discovering Atlantis, isn't it? I mean, they're so secretive. It's like you say, all you fans have been left for decades to their imagination, really. I mean, even like Luigi in Mario 64, which has been the biggest thing that's blown up. I mean, it was trending worldwide on Twitter and stuff. That was one comment in an interview from the mid 90s, where Miyamoto said, and up until September of this year, Luigi was in the game and we had to cut him because of memory reasons. And, it sounds like a throwaway comment, but suddenly now he's real and he's there. There's a model, there's voice lines. People have got him running around. It's bizarre.
And
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Go, Karen.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I was going to say, but it's the fact that it keeps coming as well, and because there's allegedly 2 terabytes of this stuff, and they've only gone through like 100.
It's going to keep coming and coming. I mean, allegedly it comes from a larger breach that you said, right? And it's like you say, it's like you've discovered Atlantis, but then you go in Atlantis and there's like a tomb, and you open it up and Nessie's there as well, and then you cut him open and it turns out he ate Bigfoot and Bigfoot's there as well. It's never ending.
And it's like Bigfoot's Wario somewhere, a new Wario game, something like
exactly.
That. But like, do you reckon it's funny, by the way, of all these leaks, but no one can find it on Nintendo directly, which would probably be most suitable for Nintendo at the moment. Do you think there's any wider, there's obviously legality issues. Like these people leaking it, do you have the balls to do that for one? Because surely, these people are traceable. Surely they're risking an awful lot to do this, aren't they? I mean, Nintendo are quite aggressive, aren't they, with these things?
I seem to believe, allegedly, the chap behind the leak is already in prison. I can't confess to know the full details, but it was allegedly traced to a breach of a company called Broad On, which is a company kind of Nintendo collaborates with, which is where the files have come from. So allegedly they not come from Nintendo themselves, they come from one of Nintendo's partner companies, which kind of explains why a lot of them are incomplete. And that is, again, allegedly tied to an individual who I think he might have even been British, was served kind of prison time for various kind of breaches, not just in Nintendo, I think also Microsoft.
Do you reckon
this material has clearly, by the way, just been offloaded? He's kind of like he's buried the loot on the way to prison, basically.
Yeah, because like you say again, obviously, this is all alleged, but from from how I understood it, apparently this was all acquired a couple of years ago. And allegedly he's kind of just dumped it, like you say, on the way, and only now people are starting to kind of pick through it and see what it was. But it's like it's the Wild West now, basically, and it's going to be. I don't fancy being Nintendo's lawyers, because the fact that everyone's picking it apart and loads of different people are breaking out.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle, right?
No, exactly.
20 years ago we would have had PRs on the phone telling us to stop writing about this stuff, right? As if it's going to go away.
Yeah. You can't put Bigfoot back in the Loch Ness Monster's stomach once it comes out.
I bet you didn't think you'd be saying that when you woke up this morning. But is there anything like that you're expecting to leak? I know that sounds weird to say that, but is there any particular game that was cancelled back in the N64 era or the SNES era that you've been actually kind of, legally hoping for to see some footage of that you think will actually come out of this?
Mother 3's got to be the big one, right?
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah, I think so. But even then, even stuff like, did they not have like an N64 version of Killer Instinct 2 ready?
That came out, didn't it? Gold? Killer Instinct Gold?
No, N64, sorry, I'm thinking SNES. It's Killer Instinct 2 SNES. Apparently they had ready, and then they just ditched it in favour of Killer Instinct Gold. So you got.
Mine's always been Ura Zelda, the 64 disc drive add-on for Ocarina.
Yeah.
But it's almost like some people were saying it's almost a shame that this stuff has leaked because it's killed some of the mystique, some of the, everything that in your mind is always going to be way more exciting than the reality, right?
Yeah.
So actually, fans have been imagining what this Ocarina of Time expansion could have been like for years and years, like, these huge new environments and characters. And, the reality of what's kind of come out in the file so far is basically like it's bits and bobs of Majora's Mask, which was the next game, but clearly they've just gone, we'll move that over. Like, you know, some of the dungeons that were in Majora's Mask it's been suggested by these leaks that they may have been part of the add-on.
Yeah, the reality
which from a development point of view makes total sense, right? Why would there be some big ditched Zelda game like content if they then went and made a sequel, which they made in a year, by the way? Of course they moved a load of that stuff over. It just makes complete sense. Yeah. I mean, that's not proven, by the way, but it's suggested.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is always obviously a lot more mundane than we hope it would be. We'll stick in the world of Nintendo because there's been a lot of controversy around Paper Mario, with Paper Mario producer Kensuke Tanabe, have I pronounced that correctly? Hopefully I have, basically claiming that he's no longer able to graphically represent individual characteristics of the game's NPCs, which has obviously stirred up a huge amount of criticism, with people saying basically like they're a little bit... I guess limited creatively. What's your take on this, Chris? And I guess your broader take on the Paper Mario game as well, if you've played it, the new one.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I didn't like the battle system. I thought that was a bit convoluted, and by the end of the game I was just actively trying to avoid it because I was enjoying the dialogue and thought it was a genuinely really funny game, one of the funnier ones in the series. But it's almost as if in trying their best to prove to everyone that it isn't Sticker Star or Colour Splash, they kind of threw in this weird puzzle combat mechanic that was just like, I don't know, just didn't click with me at all. But that aside, in terms of these comments, it's an interesting one because obviously he's saying that they were strictly limited by how much they could kind of customize the Toads or kind of mess around with any other characters in the series, and I can see almost the kind of reasoning to one extent, but there's got to be some kind of leeway, you would imagine, in some way, because if you're stuck with Toads and Goombas and Koopa Troopers, you can only really do so much with that. And although they did great things with it in this game, I think there's a lot of Toads have pretty unique personalities, and there's some really funny kind of characters in there. You kind of wonder what it could have been if they'd been given kind of a bit more, if the leash had been kind of loosened a bit.
Yeah. Andy,
it's a real shame.
Andy,
I think it's a real shame. Like, the world feels like far more sterile than it could have been. It's like Scullion says. The writing is actually genuinely fantastic in that game, like really, really funny. And it does make you wonder, how more alive, how much more personality there would be in the world if they were able to be a bit more flexible with the characters, because it's Toad City again, isn't it? Like, there's literally, it's a mechanic. It's almost like they turned it into an in-joke, that you have to find the Toads. There's just Toads absolutely everywhere. And, you look back to Thousand Year Door, which is the big fan favourite, and it really is night and day with like the creativity among the cast.
Interesting.
I can also see. Oh, sorry, you go.
And I was just going to quickly say, actually, like my missus is currently playing it, and she's really enjoying it for what it's worth. But she's more, I would say, towards that casual gamer market that they're probably aiming towards. That in terms of she's not some massive, dyed-in-the-wall Nintendo fan. She probably wouldn't be able to name a Shy Guy, for example. So these characters to her probably don't have this same like, oh, I wish there was more different characters. Does that make sense? She's just seeing all these crazy little worlds and enjoying it. Whereas when I play it, inevitably, because we've only got one Switch, I'm probably going to go, oh, they're using that guy and that guy. So I wonder if they're aware of that. I'm thinking, is it because is this the intention, basically? Are they trying to essentially leave that creativity open for the mainline series? So essentially, maybe Super Mario Odyssey 2.
I imagine it's a very corporate decision, I imagine. Around... so Tanabe said that it was after Sticker Star, I believe, which came out, I think, in 2012. Yeah. And about a year after then, Nintendo kind of expanded its IP licensing. It was about 2013, I believe, that it did that. So obviously now Nintendo's like kind of got a theme park opening. It's got a Mario movie coming. There's stuff like branding with like Lego and Uniqlo and Levi's and Moschino coming out all the time, and that's complicated, right? As a big corporation with a huge brand, to give out your IP, you really need to put some stringent rules in place so that people don't fudge it up, basically. And I imagine there is some element of that. However, it's very clear that, as you say, the mainline Nintendo games are still a lot more flexible. You look at how many new characters there are in Odyssey, for example. There's tons. Yeah. And I do know Nintendo have internally kind of regard different series in different ways. I'll give you an exclusive. Actually, I did a script test for a Mario game while I was in game development a couple of years ago, and there were certain rules that I was given about what I could and could not do within this universe. That clearly, if you looked clearly at different games in the Mario series, they contradicted those rules. So very clearly, different segments or tiers, if you like, of Mario games are given more free reign.
That's interesting.
I can also understand, like the last time before, the one before Sticker Star was Super Paper Mario on the Wii,
which was mental.
But and I can't decide whether it was mental in a good way or a bad way, because all the NPCs in that were these weird kind of pixel characters made out of squares and circles, and not one of them was memorable. So
from what I understand, though, they're still allowed to do that. Like from what Tanabe-san told me, he's allowed to create characters outside of the Mario universe.
We just can't put a beard
that's how they get away with the origami characters, right?
Yeah,
the origami characters, like, oh, they're not Mario characters. There's this other thing. It's he in the new interview with Games Radar, he specifically says that they can't create graphical differences such as gender in terms of the toads.
So why there's no toadettes in it then?
Well, exactly. I mean, this is kind of what I was going to say to you, Stephen, is that the real shame is just that there's no variety. I mean, if you went back and you played the original game, you obviously this would be highlighted to you a lot more. I mean, Origami King's a great game, right? But you go back and you see the wide variety in all of the kind of the characters and cast in the previous one. It is a little bit disappointing that we can't have, like, some female Toads or old man Toad. I mean, what's happened to Toadsworth? That guy. Where's he gone?
I haven't played it yet, so I'm going to presume. Does Captain Toad fall into that kind of remit as well? Is he all right because he's got a backpack, but he still looks like a Toad? Like, what's the balance?
I guess like a Toad dressed up in a costume is fine as long as he's not tangibly different, right?
So you can't design a beard then. So you can't design a beard.
This is probably part of the frustration among the fans, is that it's just not clear, what the rules are here.
One of the interesting, I can't even say the word interesting there. One of the interesting kind of things to come as a result of these limitations, though, and I need to be extremely careful in terms of spoilers here, how I dance around this, because it's the big moment in the game, which Andy will know what I'm talking about, is that one of the main characters is just a standard bob-omb. And without getting
into great.
Yeah, I know, but he's great. But without getting into,
my missus loves him. I think he's really funny.
But without getting into too much detail as to what happens later in the game, the fact that he is just a generic standard bob-omb almost has more, almost has a greater effect on the story later on, because it's painting, it's given this impression that all these generic enemies you're facing in the Mario games actually have their own lives and their own stories and their own backgrounds. And at the start, when you first encounter them, you think, oh, it's just a bob-omb. And then
this is my frustration with the new series. Like, I gave Origami King one of the lowest scores, I think, on Metacritic. And my frustration with the series is that
life.
That surprised me, to be honest. I don't think I should have one of the lowest scores on Metacritic. Let's put it that way. By Nintendo's standards, it's a frustrating game. It's still a great game. But my frustrating thing with the Paper Mario series, the recent ones, is that they do all the hard things well, right? The game is really funny. It's beautiful. It's full of personality. It's got it's full of imagination. And then it's let down by stuff like every single NPC has to be the same, and we're not going to put any depth into the systems. It's like you said, within 2 hours or maybe less of that game, I'm running away from enemies because I don't want to use the new battle system, because there's no reason to.
Just put normal turn-based combat in it and give them experience.
That's been the issue with this series for the last 3 installments.
Yeah, it's trying to.
It feels like they need to go and get who's the guy who ships every game? Rod Ferguson. Rod Ferguson, the shipper, who they brought into Irrational to ship BioShock. And now he's gone to he went to the Gears of War Studio Coalition to make them ship their games. And now he's gone to BioWare to help them to release some bloody games, because they don't release enough games. If you brought him into Paper Mario, he'd sort it out.
It'd be
You
well
need a
truly
good
shit.
producer like him to come in and go, stop pissing about, put some XP on the battles.
We're going to take
Give that Toad a hat.
a slight U-turn, by the way, because I just want to talk about Nintendo silence. I know it's not on the list of topics that Andy faithfully fed me. Thank you very much, Andy. But basically, like, Nintendo are silent. They are very, 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 very silent at the moment. And I know some Nintendo fans, and I've seen all the YouTube videos popping up, are a little bit worried about this because you can look around and you can see Xbox and Sony essentially getting on with it. I know they live in a different ecosystem and they're not very much rivals, but from a fan's perception, they'll see these companies going, well, they're getting on with it and they're doing this. But so why Nintendo are releasing these 8-minute mini directs with a bunch of third-party games which confuse everyone? Let's be honest. Even if you're a fan of the games, it's still a confusing method. Chris, are you? What's your take on Nintendo silence? How do you feel about it at the moment? Are you concerned, or is it just Nintendo being Nintendo?
I'm not concerned. Do you know something? See, if I was Nintendo and I'd gone through my entire... If Nintendo was a person and it was me, and I've gone through my entire life with people moaning constantly about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, and when I'm bringing out an 8-minute direct and making it clear in 8-minute direct, by the way, this is third-party companies we're showing, it's just a brief one, don't worry about it, and suddenly everyone's going... What's the Sega's making F-Zero? They're going to show us that, and then they don't. And
that's
Andy's fault.
Yeah, but
that's a PR own goal, though, right?
Yeah,
like, they're not stupid. They know that fans are desperate for Nintendo information. They obviously they're very aware that Nintendo now has no first-party games announced for the rest of the year, or in fact any date. So when they put out an 8-minute direct that's got Shin bloody whatever the hell it is,
that's the actual
as its only core announcement, they know full well that is going to cause mass frustration.
But this is what I was going to say. If I was Nintendo and I'd been through decades of people moaning all the time, at some point I would just go, like, you know something? Fuck them. We'll do this just to annoy them.
Live stream the building burning down.
Exactly. I think at this point they're just like, something. They're going to moan no matter what. So we'll just go at our own pace and we'll announce stuff when we're ready. They only announced Paper Mario like 2 months before it came out or 3 months before it came out. I get the feeling with COVID going on, that's going to be their strategy going forward, because it's not entirely clear when these games are going to be ready now, because everyone's working from home and everything's disrupted.
I think the real explanation from what I heard is really mundane. And it's basically that it's COVID, really, and that as a staunchly Japanese company, they're just really poor at dealing with remote working.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I don't mean that in just in terms of construction of the games, but in terms of how to do media remotely. I mean, obviously, the other platform holders have just, there's a general acceptance. They understand in the West, there's a general acceptance that we're all working from home, right? Yeah. So there's a general acceptance of the quality of our live stream events, whatever, is going to be lower. Phil Spencer's going to be sat in his kitchen on a laptop. Like that is acceptable to us, right? Where I don't think it is acceptable to the highest standards of a staunchly kind of conservative Japanese company. That is why, from what I understand, that is why their announcements have been so slow this year, because they just can't. They don't know how to deal with it.
Things will change. Will change.
Well, it has to change. I mean, the director they put out recently, I imagine, is because of marketing commitments. I mean, deals would have been signed that in our E3 Nintendo Direct, you'll be in it. WWE and Shin What's a Google.
Shin What's a Google.
I'm going to get slaugted for that. I mean, it's a really popular game.
All the anime RPG nerds.
I know it's a very popular game, but maybe less so in the UK. That's why they kind of did that, right? I mean, I don't think it should be underestimated how huge the pandemic as well has been for their plans, because they would have been planning for this year, 2020, perhaps for the last decade. I mean, when was Japan? I mean, I remember the 2012 London 2012 Olympics. We secured that in about 2004. So that's almost a decade, because obviously you have to build stadia and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
So they could have been planning for this year for a decade, right? Imagine it's the 2020 Olympics. It's Mario's 35th birthday. They got a theme park opening. Like there's a Mario movie on the horizon. Like this was going to be like a huge year of celebration for them. You can imagine that they would have a Nintendo Direct, from Peach's Bloody Castle at the Nintendo theme park.
This is
exactly why I'm thinking. Obviously, they're unhappy, understandably, with what's happened. They're not unhappy, but these things happen. But at the moment, you've got to imagine in Japan, it's just like, what do we do now? How do we cope with this? What are we going to do? And online, you get people saying, come on, give us stuff. And that's why the response has been, fuck them.
But surely, it clearly has. But isn't this also like a bit incompetent? I know it's very testing times. I know it's pandemic, and I can't pretend to know about game development. But Nintendo had an awful lot of focus on Animal Crossing. They had a massive viral success. The Switch has been flying off the shelves during this pandemic. Literally, everyone has so much goodwill around Nintendo at the moment. Everyone's like, "Go on, Nintendo, you saved us." Me and my missus lay on those sofas there, just playing Animal Crossing, and we're like, "It's keeping us sane." And loads of people felt that way. And surely, you think Nintendo would be like, "Look, everyone's looking at us." Surely they're thinking, we just need to make this work. But I mean,
But it is working. It's like you just said, Animal Crossing has been one of their biggest games ever. It will be one of the best sellers, if not the best seller on this system. The console, they can't make enough of them. Like they're flying off the shelves. They could go the rest of the year without releasing anything and still hit all their targets.
But the problem with the internet is what's next. Within a week of Animal Crossing coming out, everyone's saying what's next. And it's one of the main reasons people have always argued, why are they not just putting every NES and SNES game on Switch Online in one go? And it's like, well, because if you did that a week later, they'd be asking for N64 and they wouldn't be playing.
They couldn't sell them to you 7 times. How many times have you bought Mario Brothers?
Mate, I've... NES, the Game Boy Color one, they re-released it on Game Boy Advance. I bought the Wii Virtual Console, Wii U Virtual Console, 3DS Virtual Console, I'm playing it on Switch. Mario All-Stars.
NES Mini.
And the Wii Mario All-Stars, the NES Mini. Yeah, at least 10. I'd buy it again.
And that's why Nintendo do what they do, isn't it? Because they know deep down with their IPs and those characters, they've got us right in the palm of their nostalgic little grubby hands, bless them. And they're good at it, so fair play to them. On that note, let's get on to E3, because basically a lot of people have been reporting this week. A data company, in fact, has said that social media engagement around the big announcements has been up without E3, which basically shows, to me, actually just shows that people are spending more time on the internet. Not necessarily that they don't want E3, but that's just my take on it. Has it been better or worse without this show, Andy? Is it like is the world a better place without having E3? I think
you're right there to acknowledge that. Well, first of all, everything on the internet is up at the moment, because obviously large portions of the world are stuck indoors with nothing else to do. I mean, I can tell you that VGC's traffic has exploded for the last 4 or 5 months, and that is consistent with other media brands as well. There's just a lot more interest around.
Though, is it not?
Yes, I mean, there's still a guy here.
There's a lot of things around gaming are up for that reason, right? So that you've got to factor in that. I'd also say you're comparing the excitement of the first year of a new generation with the boredom of the tedium of the last year of a previous generation, which again is not a fair comparison. But the most important thing is that, I'm sure those numbers were up, but how many of them were saying that was shit? Because a ton of these announcements have been very, very disappointing. Yeah. And again, it's not, you have to acknowledge that we're in a pandemic and these companies are doing the best that they can within the conditions. It's not their fault they can't hold an event, and it's not their fault that they have to kind of cut a trailer from their house without, access to custom music and et cetera, et cetera. So they're doing their best, but I think overall it's been a very good opportunity for those who've been calling for E3's head for so long, which always comes around every decade, to show what the alternative is. And I think it's been confusing. Yeah, it's been just a big muddle of publishers dishing out bits and bobs to this event and that event, and there's been different media brands holding their events. I don't think it's been good for consumers at all. I don't think you can replicate the excitement of a physical event outside of it. I mean, imagine that Fable announcement with a live audience. it would have been big, whereas it felt a little bit underwhelming on a digital stream because we kind of knew that it was coming, and a lot of the excitement comes around that interaction, like the Keanu Reeves,
you're amazing what it was.
Someone's going to embarrass himself.
You're breathtaking. That was it, wasn't it? I think
breathtaking. That's it. Yeah, like stuff like that, like ad hoc stuff that comes.
And the memes as well, by the way. They're all about the memes as well. Look, mini Keanu.
There's nothing better than an E3 meme, and also the transparency of the press coverage, right? If you're in an event like as kind of Chris String was saying on GI.biz this morning, a lot of people kind of slagging off Halo for what it looks like. But if there would have been a physical event, people probably would have played it. Certainly with E3, people would have played that. You could have gone, look, it doesn't look great, but it plays fantastic. Or, actually it looks really good, in 4K 120 FPS, which you're not getting over a, crappy internet stream. And also just access of interviews and stuff. I've found as a news journalist that I think it's been even easier than normal for publishers to hide behind their marketing in the digital world, right? You've seen a lot of these big publisher events, they've not given out any interviews at all. Or even if they have, they kind of cherry pick, who they're speaking to, or maybe even the media brand themselves are announcing their games, right?
Yeah.
Which is an entirely different thing. So I think overall it's good for consumers if E3 comes back. The plus side that, I don't think any of us would be hesitant to see is that spreading it out a little bit is obviously helpful in terms of not just the focus of consumers, but also, people like us in the media, we can spend more time covering these games, interesting games and interesting people who might have otherwise been lost a bit.
What do you think about the future then of E3, Chris? I mean, is it a case where now everyone's shown their own hand and gone their own way? It might be a bit weird to get back together and just essentially go back to the old ways. Is it the new normal now, I guess, in the post-pandemic world that these events aren't going to happen?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, by all accounts, not counting the presentations, which always kind of speak for themselves, by all accounts, the actual E3 show floor this year sounded a bit shit. Like it was going to be, they were selling it as an ultimate fan and influencer experience or something like that, which sounded like it was just going to be a load of knobs running about pointing cameras at their own faces. Like
probably me, let's be honest.
Last year was quite shocking. Like the West Hall. So I've been going to E3 since I was 18, and that West Hall, you're used to it. I mean, I was actually shocked. Like it's so familiar to me, that place as a location, right?
Yeah.
And walking into that West Hall, and suddenly half of it was empty. It was a genuine shock. Like, what the hell? Because PlayStation weren't there and Xbox weren't there. Xbox now hold all its stuff in a separate kind of theatre that they sponsor or own. So it was literally just Nintendo and the guys selling Hello Kitty bags, in that hall. And it was a bit depressing, to be honest.
I think the future of E3 is essentially going to be, I think we're seeing very small baby steps this year kind of going heading towards it. And it's not necessarily the presentations. I think going forward, a lot of companies will be copying what Nintendo has been doing for a long time and doing these digital presentations anyway. Obviously, for a lot of them, this year has been their first crack at it, and they'll improve over time if they decide to keep to doing more of them. Because, like Andy says, it gives them more control over how these things go, and there's less chance of balls ups on stage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, the more interesting thing was when Microsoft released 70-odd indie game demos over like a week or two ago, and just said, go for it. And they all played, they were blatantly E3 demos because they all lasted about 20 minutes long. And with that, thank you for playing at the end, it's like they're exactly what you would have got at E3. Now, if a year or two down the line, those indie games are replaced with the first party games, it's difficult to do now because we're in a transition stage between generations. But once everyone's got their PS5 or their Series X, if whatever is determined to be the E3 week for Microsoft or Sony comes and they say, okay, here's an hour and a half of game trailers and here's some games that are coming soon. Now, if you jump on xCloud or if you jump on PlayStation Now and you're a subscriber, you 100%. Will get to play all these games and you won't be downloading them because we don't want people hacking and we don't want people data miners kind of hacking into them and taking all the files out of them. We will control them. You will stream them to your home. you'll get to play a 20-minute demo and then you'll be locked out of it and you won't get to play it again. You're getting the E3 experience.
100%.
They're still in control of it. You get to play 70 to 100 games on your system. Everyone's happy. I think that's
100%. There should be a mixture of the two. I mean, the problem is essentially, right, so not a lot of people realise that E3 is run by the ESA. And the ESA is run by the publishers. It's like a union, right? So the people deciding what E3 is are the people who attend E3. And the reason it's been such a mongrel of an event for a couple of years now is because they can't decide. Half of the publishers think that it should go back to the trade show that it used to be, a business thing, and the other half think that it should go fully public. And at the moment, you've got a show and a hall that's only big enough for a business show. It's tiny compared to Gamescom. With like, I don't even know how many tens of thousands of public they've had in now, but it's not big enough. And it feels like it's not fulfilling either objective. And they really just need to decide to go one or the other. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, the future of the show should be bringing it home. I mean, the best way to experience E3 has been at home for more than a decade now. There is people in the media covering E3 who gave up going a decade ago because, other than obviously the stuff that you can't do at home, the access, the interviews, what have you, you're going to, you live stream it all at home from your desk rather than running around Los Angeles, which is the biggest pain in the arse city in the world.
Well, I mean, I think you'll probably end up seeing a very kind of we'll see a different version of E3 if it's back next year. I think that's pretty much obvious. I think personally, as soon as Sony pulled out, I think that was the beginning of the end for what we know it as anyway, and that was leading to it. But guys, thank you for joining us for this episode of Off The Record. We've got less than a minute left on the Zoom meeting apparently, so it's a good time to end this video. We've got through all the topics. Thank you very much, Zoom. We got there before we upgraded. Thank you very much for joining this episode. Cheers to Chris and cheers to Andy and Carlos. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you are new to this channel. Give this video a like. Let us know what you make of all the discussions down in the comments below, and we'll see you very, very soon.